We say these Ave sisters. Let us think of the pain Christ suffered when they nailed him to the cross.
You are no longer important.
What would happen if the films that were banned, cursed, and buried in darkness were actually the most honest pieces of the human identity we try so hard to hide? Before cinema became safe and regulated by modern standards, filmmakers of the 1970s stood behind their cameras to challenge every boundary of morality and law. There was Stanley Kubrick, forced to effectively kill his own beloved creation, A Clockwork Orange, in order to protect his family from death threats. There was Straw Dogs, pushing primal violence so far that it sparked legal battles over obscenity right in the heart of Hollywood. And there was the unbearable horror of Salò, where cinema was no longer entertainment, but a work forever shadowed by the tragic death of its director, Pier Paolo Pasolini. Today, let's look back at 15 films that were once banned, but have since become immortal legends from half a century ago. 15. A Clockwork Orange, 1971, when violence became contraband.
Hi there, my little droogies.
Let's rewind time to Britain in the 1970s. It was an era of rebellion and flamboyant fashion. Do you remember that strange curiosity you felt watching a film where a masked villain sings Singing in the Rain while committing crimes? That was A Clockwork Orange. Stanley Kubrick created a haunting masterpiece about violence and psychological control, but it pushed society far beyond its comfort zone. The moment it was released, the film was branded dangerous. Critics called it sick, the press erupted in outrage, and politicians demanded immediate action. The heaviest blow came when several real-life crimes were allegedly inspired by the film. Teenagers dressed like the character Alex attacking innocent people while humming songs from the movie. Whether those claims were true or not soon stopped mattering. The film became a symbol of moral decay. To protect his family from death threats, Kubrick made an unprecedented decision. He personally requested that Warner Brothers withdraw the film from circulation in the United Kingdom. That decision accidentally turned the movie into forbidden contraband. For nearly 3 decades, British audiences could only watch it through blurry bootleg VHS tapes smuggled in from overseas. Students passed around worn-out cassettes like secret evidence, a kind of underground culture everyone wanted to experience, even though they were not allowed to. It wasn't until the late 1990s, after Kubrick's death, that the film was finally released again in Britain, leaving behind a legacy shaped by fear controversy and the eternal struggle for artistic freedom. 14. The Exorcist, 1973, when fear touched faith.
The one hope. The only hope.
I remember the bone-chilling cold of Georgetown in those days when the line between faith and madness was blurred by a terror called The Exorcist. Without cheap jump scares, the film attacked the soul itself through one unforgettable image. The elderly priest Marion standing alone beneath a pale street lamp facing the darkness, consuming an innocent soul. In that moment, cinema stopped being entertainment and became a deeply disturbing spiritual experience. Director William Friedkin made the film like a direct assault designed to break the audience. After the first screenings, ambulances reportedly waited outside theaters. Newspapers filled their headlines with stories of viewers fainting in the aisles. Church leaders condemned the film as blasphemous, and priests warned that simply watching it could be considered a sin. Religious groups across the United States and Europe protested, handing out leaflets demanding that the film be banned. In Britain, several local councils even used their authority to prohibit screenings entirely, but the bans only made the frenzy worse. People lined up around entire city blocks just to see what could cause such hysteria. The image of a young girl desecrating a crucifix and screaming with a voice that sounded like it came from hell was not merely a special effect, it was a direct challenge to the faith of millions. Half a century later, the title, The Scariest Movie of All Time, still clings to the Exorcist proof of a film so powerful it forced the entire world to confront its deepest fears. 13. Salò, or the 120 Days of Sodom. 1975, the final boss of cinematic horror. What film comes to mind when you think of a place where even the darkest imagination cannot reach? A world without law, only the rule of desire and absolute power. That is the world of Salò. Most films merely push boundaries. Pasolini's Salò destroyed them. Censors did not view the film as entertainment, but as something dangerous to society. The movie depicts fascist officials abducting teenagers and subjecting them to humiliations and cruelty almost impossible to describe. There is no mercy, no escape, only a relentless descent into horror. The film was seized by authorities in Italy and permanently banned in several countries under obscenity laws. For years, even admitting that you had seen Salò was enough to shock people. Yet what transformed the film into the darkest legend of all was the death of its director, Pier Paolo Pasolini, just before the film's release. His body was found on a beach horribly mutilated after being run over repeatedly by a car. The brutal death immediately fueled conspiracy theories. Was Pasolini murdered because of what he dared to expose in his film? That tragedy sealed the film's myth forever. Even today, in film forums around the world, Salò is still referred to as the ultimate shock film, a bloody testament to the cruelty of humanity that many viewers still cannot bring themselves to watch in full even once. 12. Pink Flamingos, 1972, Redefining Filth.
No further questions, no further pictures. I have spoken.
Thanks for the scoop, Divine. Next month's sales should be booming. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for coming.
There was a very different Baltimore in the midnight cinemas of the 1970s, a place where cleanliness and respectability were luxuries. Under the twisted vision of John Waters, often called the Pope of Trash, Pink Flamingos was not simply a movie. It was a slap in the face of its era, a grotesque celebration of the rawest parts of human nature. John Waters didn't make films to be loved. He made them to make people throw up. His goal was clear: create a movie that should be banned. The story revolves around a ridiculous competition between Divine and a married couple to determine who deserves the title of the filthiest person alive. Courts repeatedly labeled the film obscene and attempted to suppress it, but those attempts only fueled a cult following audiences who treated surviving the film as a badge of courage. The most infamous moment, and perhaps one of the most shocking scenes in film history, arrives at the very end. The star Divine actually eats dog feces on camera. No special effects, no trick editing, it was 100% real. The scene shocked audiences so deeply that it permanently redefined what filth could mean in art. And despite being hated by censors, Pink Flamingos was eventually preserved in the United States National Film Registry. 11. The Devils, 1971, The Vatican's Fury.
As we say these Ave sisters, let us think of the pain Christ suffered when they nailed him to the cross.
You are no longer important.
If you've ever heard about films supposedly cursed by the church, then The Devils by Ken Russell is perhaps the clearest example. Based on the real 17th century demonic possession case in Loudon Russell created A World of Madness starring Oliver Reed and Vanessa Redgrave. The film not only portrays the hysteria of possessed nuns, but also exposes the corruption hidden within religious authority. In Italy, the outrage was so intense that both the director and cast were threatened with imprisonment if they ever set foot in the country. Even in Britain and the United States, the film was brutally cut in order to be released. The most shocking moment was the infamous sequence known as the Rape of Christ, in which the nuns, consumed by frenzy, commit horrifying acts of desecration toward a statue of Jesus. The scene was considered so offensive by censors at the time that it was removed entirely from most official versions of the film. Even today, Warner Brothers still refuses to release the complete original cut, turning The Devils into what many call a masterpiece in chains. Directors like Guillermo del Toro have continued to campaign for the full version to be restored, because for them it remains one of the most powerful and unrestrained works cinema has ever produced. 10. Straw Dogs, 1971. The Fragile Line of Consent. I still cannot forget the suffocating feeling of 1971 when audiences witnessed the collapse of a gentle intellect. Dustin Hoffman, playing a quiet mathematician who once lived only among numbers, is pushed to the brink and ultimately transforms into a cold-blooded killer. Sam Peckinpah was already famous for violence, but Straw Dogs pushed everything far beyond acceptable limits. The center of the controversy was the sexual assault scene involving the wife. Peckinpah's filmmaking style made the moment dangerously ambiguous, sparking fierce debates about the boundary between consent and coercion. Feminist groups protested fiercely, condemning the film as an insult and a threat to women's safety. In Britain, Straw Dogs set an unprecedented precedent for a Hollywood film. It was prosecuted under obscenity laws. Censors argued that the film portrayed violence and sexuality in a way that was disturbingly appealing, potentially encouraging deviant behavior in society. Despite the backlash the film endured as a bitter lesson about the animalistic nature of human beings, leaving behind a scar that many censors of the 1970s never forgot. 9. The Last House on the Left, 1972, Relentless Cruelty. When audiences stepped into cinemas in 1972, Wes Craven unleashed a horror that felt impossible to wash away with The Last House on the Left. It was a dark experience where the line between civilization and savagery completely vanished. Viewers were forced to witness young lives being crushed beneath the cruelty of violent criminals, only to realize that the greatest terror does not live in the darkness. It lives in what human beings are capable of doing to each other in a single, merciless moment of fate. Craven crafted a film so raw that it felt less like watching a movie and more like witnessing a real crime unfold. Incidents in theaters quickly became legendary, audiences vomiting, fainting, and even rumors of heart attacks during screenings. Even Quentin Tarantino, known for his own brutal filmmaking, later admitted that this was the only film he could not endure and had to walk out of midway through. British censors reacted with extreme measures, refusing to grant the film a license for more than 30 years. It became entangled in the infamous video nasties panic, seized and destroyed as if it were a toxic virus. Craven himself later said he never expected such a violent reaction yet, that uncompromising brutality ultimately transformed the film into a landmark that reshaped the entire revenge horror genre that followed. 8. Cannibal Holocaust, 1979, when fiction became a murder case.
God, my leg! God, my leg! Hold him down. Hold him down. Take one.
If there is one film that made the boundary between art and crime feel dangerously thin, it is Cannibal Holocaust. Few people truly understand the confusion of Italian police in 1979 when they stormed into cinemas, confiscated the film reels, and arrested director Ruggero Deodato because they believed he had created a snuff film, a movie depicting real murder on camera. The realism of this early found footage style was so disturbing that Deodato had to bring his actors into court to prove they were still alive, clearing himself of the murder accusations. However, one brutal truth could not be denied. Several animals in the film, including a turtle, a monkey, and a pig, were genuinely killed during filming. That fact alone led to the film being banned across much of the world. Censors were horrified by the way Deodato blended staged violence with real cruelty to create one of the most disturbing viewing experiences imaginable. Despite being condemned as barbaric, Cannibal Holocaust survives as a chilling reminder of the power of images and humanity's dark curiosity toward forbidden things. It is not just a film, it is a disturbing examination of the savage instincts hidden deep within us all. 7. Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, 1975. The dark corner of exploitation cinema.
And pain. Do you fear pain?
Who does not, Commandant? We shall see.
To mention Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS is to mention one of the most notorious stains of the exploitation genre. The film drags viewers into a world where morality hangs on the barrel of a gun, and perversion marches proudly in a neatly pressed military uniform. The character, Ilsa, embodies a primal nightmare, a ruthless female figure conducting cruel medical experiments on human bodies. It is not merely violence, but a disturbing experiment meant to measure the limits of female endurance. A haunting reminder that cruelty recognizes no gender. What made the film particularly disturbing was its toxic blend of concentration camp brutality and sexual exploitation. Cheap, crude, and unapologetically offensive, it nevertheless held a strange attraction within the underground circuits of cinema. Authorities in Germany, Britain, and Australia quickly banned it outright, condemning the film as an insult to both history and moral decency. Perhaps the strangest detail of all is that the movie was filmed on the very same set once used for the lighthearted sitcom Hogan's Heroes. The bizarre contrast between a cheerful comedy and a grim torture film only added to the legend surrounding Ilsa. Despite repeated efforts by censors to bury it forever, the film survived through midnight screenings and bootleg tapes passed from hand to hand, maintaining an almost mythic presence in the shadows of cult cinema. 6. I Spit on Your Grave, 1978. The War of Revenge.
You got a boyfriend?
I have many boyfriends.
Could I be your friend?
Sure.
Do you remember the late 1970s when the infamous video nasties panic began sweeping across Britain? Among the thousands of tapes seized and banned, one title always sat near the top of the blacklist: I Spit on Your Grave. This was not just a horror film, it became the spark for one of the most intense censorship battles in modern cinema history. The story follows a young female writer who suffers a brutal assault and later returns to track down those responsible one by one. Authorities were alarmed by the film's relentless directness, considering it too graphic and disturbing to be shown publicly. Yet the real power of the movie was not its violence, but the argument it ignited a debate that has never truly ended. Was the film a fierce feminist statement about justice, or simply violent exploitation disguised as art? While critics like Roger Ebert famously condemned it as a vile bag of garbage, later academic discussions began interpreting it differently as an angry cry against the injustices women endure in society. No matter the interpretation, the film refused to disappear. Despite bans, cuts, and legal challenges, I Spit on Your Grave endured as a defining symbol of the revenge genre, forcing audiences to confront the darkest corners of their own ideas about justice. 5. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Violence in the Mind. If there is a film that proves the audience's imagination can be far more terrifying than what actually appears on screen, it is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In the suffocating summer atmosphere of rural Texas in 1974, viewers left theaters shaken, convinced they had witnessed rivers of blood spilling across the screen. Yet the truth is far stranger. The film contains surprisingly little explicit gore. Director Tobe Hooper pulled off one of cinema's greatest psychological tricks. Instead of relying on graphic violence, he used the roar of a chainsaw rough documentary-style imagery and the oppressive heat of the Texas landscape to create unbearable tension. That heat was real. The cast filmed under temperatures approaching 40 degrees Celsius inside a decaying house filled with actual bones and rotting animal remains, producing a level of realism that bordered on unbearable. British censors were so disturbed that they banned the film for years and even attempted to restrict the word chainsaw from appearing in promotional titles. Yet it was precisely that unseen imagined brutality that turned Leatherface into an immortal horror icon, establishing the blueprint for nearly every slasher film that followed. 4. Snuff, 1975, the marketing hoax of the century.
Clona Airlines flight number 6 LSA will depart in 20 minutes.
Oh, God! Help me! Somebody help me!
Next comes one of the darkest and most successful marketing stunts in film history: Snuff. Imagine the media earthquake of 1975, when this low-budget exploitation film was advertised as containing real murder footage supposedly filmed in South America. The distributors cleverly exploited the public's morbid curiosity, constructing a lie so provocative that people simply could not resist. Audiences lined up around theaters' feminist groups, protested loudly outside cinemas, and the controversy escalated so dramatically that the FBI actually launched an investigation. The panic forced the actors involved in the film to publicly appear and prove that they were still alive. In reality, the infamous murder scene was nothing more than a cheaply staged special effect added after the original film had already been completed. Yet the deception worked brilliantly. The scandal turned the film into a financial success, earning profits many times greater than its tiny production budget. Snuff ultimately became a chilling lesson in exploitation, filmmaking, sometimes controversy. Itself is the most powerful advertisement a movie could ever have. 3. Faces of Death, 1978, the forbidden fruit of the VHS era.
Jesus doesn't live here anymore.
Among stacks of cartoon tapes and romantic films, there was one title whispered about like a guilty secret Faces of Death. Marketed as a documentary about death, the film created a massive psychological shockwave by blending real news footage of accidents with staged graphic scenes supposedly taking place inside laboratories. That blurred line between reality and fabrication turned the movie into the ultimate forbidden fruit. It was banned in more than 40 countries from Britain to Australia, and in some places even owning a copy could potentially land you in legal trouble. Yet the bans only fueled an underground obsession. Copies circulated secretly through schoolyards and midnight gatherings where audiences watched with a mix of terror and fascination, convinced they were witnessing the final moments of real human lives. Even after the director later admitted that much of the footage was staged by special effects expert Alan Apone. Faces of Death endured as a chilling symbol of humanity's morbid curiosity about mortality, proof of how powerful our darkest curiosity can be. 2. In the Realm of the Senses, 1976. Real intimacy, smuggled film reels. Japan in the 1970s was a nation suspended between deep-rooted conservatism and a rapidly shifting cultural landscape. In the midst of that tension, director Nagisa Oshima detonated a cinematic bomb that shook censorship systems across the world. In the Realm of the Senses, the film was not simply a drama, it was an extreme experiment exploring the dangerous intersection between desire and death. Based on the real story of Sada Abe, a geisha who strangled her lover and later mutilated his body in a frenzy of obsessive love, Oshima placed scenes of fully unsimulated intimacy on screen. Under Japanese law at the time, the film would have been immediately classified as obscene, and its negative destroyed if discovered. To save his creation, Oshima made a daring and ingenious move. He declared the project a French co-production and secretly shipped the film reels to Paris for processing and editing. This brilliant act of legal maneuvering allowed the movie to survive. But it also turned the film into a kind of exile, unable to fully exist in its own homeland for decades. 1. Caligula, 1979. The epic that went off the rails. Perhaps no film better embodies cinematic controversy than Caligula. What began as an ambitious historical epic ultimately spiraled into one of the most chaotic productions in film history. Imagine a screenplay written by Gore Vidal, performed by legendary actors like Helen Mirren and Peter O'Toole, yet financed and shaped by Bob Guccione, the publisher of Penthouse magazine. The creative war between director Tinto Brass and Guccione turned the set into a genuine battleground. Guccione secretly filmed additional explicit scenes and inserted them into the final cut without the knowledge of the principal actors. The result was a bewildering collision between high art and raw sensationalism. When the film was completed, nearly the entire cast publicly disowned it, calling the project a disgrace. Caligula was banned in numerous countries, seized by customs authorities, and dragged through endless legal battles. Yet despite, or perhaps because of the controversy, the film earned tens of millions of dollars at the box office and became a cultural phenomenon impossible to ignore. It remains perched at the summit of cinematic scandal, a cautionary tale about what can happen when artistic ambition is driven into the shadows by excess and obsession. Time may fade the images on old VHS tapes, but the questions these films raised about morality, human nature, and freedom of expression remain painfully alive. In the end, a truly terrifying film is not the one that makes you scream inside the theater. It is the one that continues to haunt you long after the lights come back on and you return to the safety of everyday life. And now I want to ask you, among these 15 films, which one made you feel the most uneasy just hearing its story? Or have you ever been brave enough to watch one of them all the way through? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Hit like if you enjoy these nostalgic deep dives, and subscribe to the channel so we can keep opening these sealed archives of cinema together in the videos ahead.